Hi, I'm Alex Congdon, and this is the Expat Business Hero podcast. Today's guest is Justin Damian Furness. Now, Justin describes himself as a high-performance facilitator, integrative medicine and behavior specialist, and is the founder of the LifePrint system, changing the way we interact and understand each other. Now, he's worked with several high-performance athletes and celebrities, and today runs his educational company in Switzerland, serving his clients from all around the world, and he's impacted over 100,000 people so far. Now, Justin tells the story of him growing up in apartheid, South Africa, and eventually following his heart, following love, and moving to Switzerland. And he recounts some of the challenges that he faced in adapting to life in Switzerland and some of the cultural clashes he had in living in a German-only speaking village where he couldn't relate or speak to many people in his community. He talks about his mantra, adapt or die, or not self-destructing but self-disrupting. Also the importance of the relationship that he had and he has today with his partner, and how that's crucial for your business. Also talks about his love of failing, or moreover the lessons you learn from failing. And finally, an insight into his very ambitious future goals. He talks about his company that he's trying to create for the future, supporting the software or the input or the intelligence going into androids, and how do we program in the future with their personality patterns. Anyway, fascinating conversation, and I leave you that now. Well, I've met a really nice South African, and he's here with us now. Welcome, Justin Damian Furness. Nice to meet you, Justin.
Nice to meet you, Alex. Thank you for having me on your show.
Okay, so Justin, now you are in Zurich, Switzerland today, but you originally come from sunny South Africa. So I'm going to go straight to it and ask you, what was it like growing up in apartheid South Africa during that time, and how the hell did you end up in Switzerland?
Ooh, that's a juicy one, Alex. Well, it was an extremely challenging and difficult time. Growing up in a system or in a country that was completely separated from the rest of the world. There were sanctions, and the idea and so much separation going on internally as well as externally, globally. It was a really interesting time to actually be born and to live through that. And then the transition that came afterwards in my kind of teenage years, and navigating that. But from a very young age, I always knew that this was wrong. There was something inside. And so that awareness from an early age really made me a disruptive child. And so that challenges with the challenges that my parents had on not knowing how to deal with this, with no external kind of access to information, made it very challenging for a very kind of, kind of forward-thinking child growing up in a system that was, to me, so archaic and so rigid and so wrong. The only way that I could really get that across, growing up with the mindset, and this was the mindset of the time, was children should be seen and not heard. And so that challenge of really kind of being outspoken led me into all sorts of lovely adventures and disruptions within that development. And so it's super interesting in terms of where we are now, and how fast things have adapted and evolved within that time. But yeah, it was definitely a great time to be born, and definitely an interesting place. As South Africa, as I'm sure, or maybe not sure, that your audience is aware of, is like a really melting pot of so many cultures, and there's a reason why they call it the Rainbow Nation. And so having to deal with all those pockets of separation, and having many friends and kind of very forward ideas was of great value to me now, for sure.
So you you switched the sunshine of South Africa for the mountains of Switzerland. So how did that happen?
Love happened.
It's always
So, oh man, there's two things in this world that I really, really adhere to, and that's the first one is purpose, and the second one is love. And I think they're kind of equally balanced. And I think with those two combined, I think any human being becomes an unstoppable force. One that will literally break all limits and boundaries to get to and to achieve. And yeah, I had both, so I was very fortunate.
fantastic. Okay, Justin, fast forward to today. You've created a business and you've got this methodology called the LifePrint system. Can you explain a little bit more about that and how it helps people?
Sure, Alex. The LifePrint system was really born out of my own pain and suffering. And at the end of the day, it really helps people to evaluate what their fundamental and their natural behavior patterns are. And really empowers them to understand what's natural for them to experience in a reactive state. We really have a big global phenomenon going on at the moment where we have so many people depressed, so many people taking prescription medications, so many children taking prescription medications and being labeled with behavioral issues and challenges. And so LifePrint is really there to empower people to understand who they truly are and what are the fundamental needs, the highest driving needs that they need to have in order to feel as if life starts to happen for them as opposed to them. And so by really understanding and being able to evaluate oneself, that really leads to enhancement of someone's talents, abilities, and natural encouraging behavior patterns. And then basically once somebody achieves that, it really helps them to evolve onto a new level where something unique happens because they actually really get to identify what their genius really is. And so they can triple down on that. And success becomes a byproduct of really feeling fulfilled, helping people to become energy generators as opposed to energy environmental reactors. And so I truly believe that life is not a pair of elastic pants. It's not a one size fits all for everybody. And until we can learn self-evaluation and self-awareness, only then will we really be empowered to enhance what we're really, really good at and what we're here to do and have our purpose. And that's really looking at why the behavior is there in such a reactivity, and not how to fix it, but understanding why it's there. And so that really is the journey and was really the driving force behind why the LifePrint system was created.
Wow, you've picked a very, very profound and challenging topic to help people with. Now, one of the things that I know that a lot of expats face when they're moving to a new country to set up a business is adapting and adapting to their environment. And I think that's a topic close to your heart as well, the whole concept of adaptation. How does that link into how you help people as well?
Well, Alex, that's the adaptation stories for me is super, super interesting. Once again, looping back to where it all began in South Africa and really going through the phase and transition coming from one of the most radical political and racial transitions known globally worldwide. And adaptation for me has been a journey. It's definitely been one of experience and one of immense growth, simply because the adaptation happens at every single stage of development. And so I'm not the same person when I was 9 years old as I was when I'm 13 years old. And so the developmental awareness that you go through. And so adaptation for me started off as being very angry and very aggressive, and really kind of a call to arms, if you would, against the old system and kind of the bad, the kind of very tribal masculinity of going to war, being not having the emotional maturity established yet. And so adaptation for me has changed over the years as I've grown through understanding more and more and more about it. But at the end of the day, I think it's crucial when we look at, and I'm always looking to nature, I'm always looking at what is the environment kind of trying to tell me, looking towards natural systems and understanding natural systems. And, species that don't adapt die, and they die pretty quickly, and they die off. And species are dying all the time, but there's also new species evolving and being created. And so I'm a firm believer in adapting to environments, but not forgetting the evolution that got someone to that point, meaning that they must never lose who they are within that process of adaptation, because their brain will wire completely differently, and they will find a niche within how to flourish. The same thing as a blade of grass can push through concrete, and it's a natural phenomenon. But the more you kind of resist that adaptation, the intensity of suffering and pain will basically happen to push you through to a point of getting enough energy to break through that boundary or that limit in terms of what you're putting on yourself. Because I really do believe that adaptation is a reflection of your internal flexibility and how flexible you are as a human being.
Okay, Justin, let's rewind the story again. Let's go back. Let's go back in time. Sorry to take you all the way back again.
No, absolutely.
And look at the early days when you were in the throes of setting up your business. What was it that you were aspiring to? What were you trying to become by creating this business?
It wasn't really what I was aspiring to become as much as it was aspiring to save or help someone to not have to go through nearly losing their life before figuring something out. I didn't want someone to have to go through the amounts of pain and suffering. There's two things that I know for absolute certain, Alex, and that's one, ultimately, the majority of people typically are kind. Being a human being means that ultimately you're a kind person. Beneath all the BS is really ultimately a kind human being. And number two is knowing that no matter what, somebody's going to mess up, or someone's going to do some pretty dumb stuff along the way. But I certainly, knowing that everybody is kind, underneath all of that, I think people are just doing the best that they possibly can. And so I default straight into empathy because I really know and have an understanding of what pain and suffering is. And in all of that, it's really just I set out to really help people figure out what it is that sets them alight, even though they may have been conditioned otherwise. And I do believe that's the biggest struggle that we face is to disrupt our own conditioning of what we think is acceptable and normal, and trying to fit or trying to belong. And that's humanity's biggest, or really people's biggest thing is where do I belong and how do I fit in? We tribal by nature. We come from a species, a family. And so moving into a new environment is one of the most stressful things that a human being can go through. And don't get me wrong, change is great, but when you look at it in terms of a physiological response, in terms of a body, the body doesn't like it. The mind doesn't like it. It's uncomfortable. It's a stressful process. It's stress on all levels: physiological, mental, emotional, environmental, and that also could have spiritual consequences too, in terms of somebody's own faith or the faith that they have. So yeah.
So you've got this very compelling vision as you get started on this business,
Yes.
but I'm sure it wasn't all plain sailing. So give us an example of a really big obstacle that you faced when you were first starting up and you were getting, or a big challenge that was in your way.
Oh, Alex, this is one of the biggest ones for me. The cross culture from South Africa to Switzerland is so huge. Depending on where you find yourself in Switzerland, because just like South Africa, Switzerland is kind of a melting pot of culture. In terms of the geographical spread of where Switzerland finds itself. And so you've got Italian, you've got French, you've got German, and then kind of depending on what city you're in. But when we first started out here, I was in and still am for the most part, in a area that has no English speaking people mostly in it. It's just mainly German speaking. It's a German speaking town. And so being a newly married man, possibly got married in October of 2012, was in Switzerland by December 2012, literally starting a new business in a new culture where I didn't speak the language. I was newly married, trying to figure things out in terms of sharing occupancy in a new culture in a new country, with the conditioning and the old conditioning of the man's kind of got to be the breadwinner and take care of business and look after the family, and the old conditioning of what that looks like. And so the biggest lesson that I learned in this whole process was self-disruption, not self-destruction. And the sooner I got out of my own way, because there was a lot of kind of intensity in terms of breaking new molds, learning a new language, kind of starting a business that was, integrative medicine, also not really being accepted the line of education that I chose here in Switzerland in terms of being on the medical insurance and all of that. So I really kind of always was this underdog, really kind of still pushing and trying to change those structures.
So you're somewhat fighting against the system as well.
Oh, well, yeah, it seems to be kind of a life path that I've chosen. So really trying to figure out and adapting to a system, but also trying to find my own way of doing that. And so that was the biggest lesson, was kind of getting out of my own way and stop fighting, and really adapting to a system to find your own niche. And so that was the biggest self-awareness that I got from moving here. Definitely not clean sailing. That's for sure. No.
Now, the journey like this is obviously going to have many of these kind of obstacles. Did you have any help along the way? And what was that help?
The help was really having a super, super supportive wife, who, no matter what, always knew that I love her. And because things are going to get intense, things are going to have an amount of pressure that is second to none, because of the adaptation that's going through. Adaptation takes time, and that's typically what I find people are really being handicapped by, is their impatience. And so if anything is to understand being patient, giving things space to develop and to grow, but still having the daily urgency of taking action, learning, growing, and giving yourself permission to fail, and not be crippled by your failures, but to learn from them as quickly as possible and start moving forward. And sort of almost this fail fast system, because I love failure. I love failing. I'm actually super addicted to it. And so there's something that happens when you actually get it, and you understand what failure really is. And that's why I can truly get excited about being a failure and failing so often, because my chemistry now is as such as that at every opportunity the failure comes, I know that there's success and growth that is lighting me up along the journey. Because I already think I've won. Like I've won. I've just by being here, I've won. So there was a time where I definitely shouldn't be here, and I shouldn't be having this conversation with you. And so I'm grateful just to be here and to be failing along the way, because I know so much growth comes from it. That it's more, it brings you more remembrance when reflecting on the journey. All the stories come from the failures, all the good ones anyway. And nobody remembers them. That's the beautiful thing. Only you. It's a very selfish process. Only you remember the failures. People only remember the wins. They don't remember the failures. They remember the wins. And so it's an interesting dynamic that happens. And so when people actually stop allowing themselves to be crippled by their failure and fail fast, the acceleration of adaptation becomes a lot quicker.
It's sometimes quite a high stakes game setting up a business. And for you personally, what were you at risk of losing if you didn't get to where you wanted to get to with this business, with this plan?
It's a deep one, definitely. And I think at the end of the day, for me, it's about making sure that I got to choose. No risk. If there's no risk, there's no real appreciation. There's no real enjoyment of the reward. And so this whole kind of journey has been, I don't know. It's hard to put into words. Just ask the question again, Alex. Let's see what else comes up.
Well, I mean, what I'm trying to get to was that you were obviously putting yourself at risk by setting up a business like this, and the stakes were high, I'm guessing. If it didn't work out, what was the consequence for you? What could have been the consequence for you?
If this didn't work out, it meant that everybody else was right. And there's no ways I would be able to accept that.
So that really was that was quite profound for you, that feeling.
Absolutely. My whole journey has been around understanding and finding independence. That's been a personal journey of my own. And so in any structure where I find myself being dependent, it makes it very, very challenging, which is also one of the reasons why LifePrint was kind of born and came out of that, was simply because everybody has a different drive inside of them. The minute somebody becomes dependent on me, that's a real problem for me. Any codependency for me is a real challenge. And so what I wanted to do was create a system where somebody could basically take it and then have the self-awareness, have the perspective, have the understanding of how their mechanism works. And so it puts them into the driving seat where they are not reliant on measuring themselves in terms of environmental feedback, or what success looks for, or the conditions of what the societal expectation or the cultural expectation is, and then basically be able to generate their own place within where they are. And that's the thing also in terms of expats, in terms of moving and starting a business in another country, you better believe that you've got to adapt to again, inheriting different cultural belief systems, different cultural perspectives, different cultural situations. And for the most part, that doesn't really go down well with a lot of conditioning or a lot of things, depending on where you grow up or how you grew up. The more you actually travel, the easier this is going to be. But if, it's always dependent on what the person's, where they grew up and what were the environmental circumstances of what that looked like. And so that's why everybody's so unique, and this system gives the opportunity for them to understand that. And so there was, everything was at risk.
Now, you touched on this before. The question I'm trying to get to here is around your success, in this journey in creating this business. And previously, you said to me that you've already won. What do you mean?
For me, I've already won simply because the current level of growth that we're at, at the current level that we're at in terms of our growth, we're already impacting about 100,000 people a year. If anything happens to me, there's somebody that takes that over. And so I'm no longer just the only person that can do what I can do. And there are mechanisms in place that work and continue to grow and flourish. And for me, legacy is everything. And so really being able to give back and leave this place better than what I found it, I've already done that. And so anything that comes from here, I am so grateful for and just so full of love and appreciation, because everything from here, because understand that from having absolutely nothing, from living on the street with no food, from breaking into your neighbor's house to steal leftover food, from, going from there to living in Switzerland, and really nearly losing and having nothing. Everything else here is just, I've won. It's just everything from this moment in is all everything I could possibly want. So it gets better. There was a beautiful saying that I can kind of recall is, you can't pursue happiness from a place of lack, because it's to not know. You don't know. You have to pursue happiness from happiness. There has to be a place inside of you where you start that pursuit from already having it and making that choice. And the more and more choices that you take away from yourself, or that you limit yourself in having, the more and more suffering starts to occur. And so choice and decisions and adaptation are just everything to me.
Well, the next question might seem a bit odd then, given that you think that you've won. Because I want you to look forward and ask you the question, which I think you found, okay, this is a bit tricky. 5 years, 10 years, doesn't really matter. But what are your goals for the future? What do you still want to achieve, accomplish, personally or business-wise?
There is a big vision. So that was worst case scenario, which is what I was playing you. So worst case scenario is I disappear, which I know I'm not going anywhere. So that's worst case. So we've got a big vision and big things that are happening in the future. The next layer that we're looking at is reaching capacity of at least 99 analysts globally. And so we've got about another 40 trained analysts to go. So we've got a bit of some work still to do.
And those analysts are helping to run your program globally. Is that right?
Correct. So certified analysts to basically be able to help people. From that, we're training instructors, so teachers that will be able to go out and train other students in other areas. We're adding another layer to the technology in terms of giving this access to everybody as an app where they will be able to listen to their own personality So they'll be given access to listen to their own personality pattern and understand their whole neurological wiring. And basically add a layer onto that is the Alexa skill. Basically, you'll be able to interact with Alexa. She'll be able to tell you exactly what energies, what kind of patterns you're in, and be able to interact with her basically as a daily coach to help you to figure out exactly what the best steps are to take day by day, depending on where you find yourself. And so that's really the next layer that we're looking at. And then building a business leadership solution side, which will be able to help team managers, team leaders, executives, HR directors to understand the team dynamics of different products that they're looking at, different teams. So making sure, for instance, an example is if you want a sales team, neurologically, you don't really want them operating as a customer support team. And so making sure that the teams are balanced for their objectives and making sure that the needs are fulfilled within both the employee as well as the company, and aligning those needs so everybody starts to feel fulfilled within their purpose and what it is that they're there to achieve.
But it sounds like you've got a lot on your plate going forward.
Yeah, so that's the next 5 years. The next 10 years, if you want 10 years, we've basically just founded a company that's going to be called IBA Technologies. And it's basically advanced integration behavior patterns for androids. So within the next 25 years, future pacing, I'm looking at every single household will probably have an Android in it, similar to the same as a vacuum cleaner. And so those personality patterns and algorithms and self-learning AI systems are going to have to basically be safe and secure in terms of what are the skills that Android is going to have. Perhaps cooking, support in terms of family, CPR, and what behavior algorithms in terms of interacting with us humans is that going to look like based on the actual LifePrint system and architecture. So that's 25 years.
Wow, that's amazing, and I think very inspiring as well for a lot of people who don't always set compelling visions about where they want to take their business. So thanks for that.
Yeah, thanks, Alex.
So really, just to wrap up, and for the benefit of those listening who are thinking of setting up their own business, specifically expats, have you got any perhaps last couple of bits of advice that you'd give someone contemplating doing that?
Yeah, absolutely, Alex. I'll loop back before is literally be flexible, have an infinite amount of patience, be kind to yourself, as well as to your partner and family that's also going through this an immense amount of change, and really just to learn to adapt to a new culture and be as open as possible. I always suggest, if you're feeling that resistance or that kind of little bit of anxiety or fear coming up, then you should probably move towards it. And don't rush at it like a bull, but move towards it and understand it, and kind of just step gently around each other and around things that you really want to do. You will find a way. You just got to be patient, but every day take the steps in order to adapt and learn and grow. And fail often and fail forward.
That's brilliant. Thanks so much. Justin, if our listeners want to find out more about you, what's the best way? You've given me your website link, which, if you're okay, I'll read out to everyone, which is justinfurness.net. So that's just JustinFurness.net. I'll put that into the show notes. And I think what you've put on the website there is a fulfillment factor assessment that you're offering to everybody. And it's a free 30-minute call with yourself, which is to really help someone map out what their needs are with regards to their journey towards fulfillment. Did I say that right?
Yes, Alex, that's absolutely right. Everybody will get a free 30-minute fulfillment factor assessment with me personally. They just need to go to the website, click on get my free personalized fulfillment factor assessment, fill out the form. I will then contact them personally and give them a free report just to get them started while we set up a 30-minute call with them. And this is a call, there's literally no expectation. This is just 100% give from our end, just helping people, once again, trying to meet our mission of helping them to figure out what their true personalized fulfillment is.
Fantastic. Justin, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Alex. It's been amazing. Thank you very, very much. It's good to. I hope this really helps your audience, and I hope they can take some value from it, and helps them to grow and to take the steps that are necessary